is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Without it, we perish. Historical consciousness is to civilized society what memory is to individual identity. Without memory and without the stories by which our memories are carried forward, we cannot say who or what we are. Without them, our life and thought dissolve into a meaningless, unrelated rush of events. Without them, we cannot do the most human of things. We cannot learn, use language, pass on knowledge, raise children, establish rules of conduct, engage in science, or dwell harmoniously in society. Without them, we cannot govern ourselves. Nor can we have a sense of the future as a time we know will come, because we remember that other tomorrows also have come and gone. A culture without memory will necessarily be barbarous and easily tyrannized, even if it is technologically advanced. The incessant waves of daily events will occupy all our attention and defeat all our efforts to connect past, present, and future, thereby diverting us from an understanding of the human things that unfold in time, including the paths of our own lives. The stakes were beautifully expressed in the words of the great Jewish writer Isaac Bashevis Singer. When a day passes, it is no longer there. What remains of it? Nothing more than a story. If stories weren't told or books weren't written, man would live like the beasts, only for the day. The whole world, all human life, is one long story. Singer was right. As individuals, as communities, as countries, we are nothing more than flotsam and jetsam without the stories in which we find our lives' meaning. These are stories of which we are already a part, whether we know it or not. They are the basis of our common life, the webs of meaning in which our shared identities are suspended. This book is an invitation to become acquainted with one of those webs of meaning, the American story. It does not pretend to be a complete and definitive telling of that story. Such an undertaking would be impossible in any event because the story is ongoing and far from being concluded. But it is also the case that this book has striven to be as compact as possible. As any author will tell you, the most painful task in writing a book of this kind is deciding what to leave out. It is always very easy to add things, but very difficult to take them out, because every detail seems important. One is constantly committing cruel acts of triage, large and small, throwing details out of the lifeboat to keep the vessel from sinking, a harsh but necessary act, if what remains is to take on the shape of a story rather than a mere accumulation of facts. As will be clear, I have chosen to emphasize the political history of the United States at every turn, treating it as the skeleton of the story, its indispensable underlying structure. This emphasis is particularly appropriate for the education of American citizens living under a Republican form of government. There are other ways of telling the story, and my own choice of emphasis should not be taken to imply that the other aspects of our history are not worth studying. On the contrary, they contain immense riches that historians have only begun to explore. But one cannot do everything all at once. One must begin at the beginning with the most fundamental structures before one can proceed to other topics. The skeleton is not the whole of the body, but there cannot be a functional body without it. History is the study of change through time, and theoretically, it could be about almost anything that happens. But it must be selective if it is to be intelligible. Indeed, in practice, what we call history leaves out many of the important aspects of life. It generally does not deal with the vast stretches of time during which life goes on normally, during which people fall in love, have families, raise their children, bury their dead, and carry on with the small acts of heroism, sacrifice, and devotion that mark so much of everyday life. The unhistoric acts, as George Eliot wrote in the closing words of Middlemarch, of those who lived faithfully in a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. There are a few moments like the American holiday of Thanksgiving or great public commemorations at which the low murmur of those ordinary things becomes audible and finds a measure of public acknowledgement. But by and large, history is interested in the eruptions of the extraordinary into the flow of the regular. It must leave out so very much. This book extends a come-as-you-are invitation, and as such it attempts to be a friendly point of entry for all sorts of listeners.
Para seguir escuchando este audiolibro gratuitamente, haz clic en el enlace de la descripción y podrás escucharlo completo sin coste gracias a la prueba de 30 días de Audible.